The departure gate was nearly empty by the time they called our row. Milo had fallen asleep 20 minutes earlier, his full weight against my left side, his small sneakers hanging off the edge of the seat. I held the 2 boarding passes in my right hand, folded once, creased hard, and I did not look at my phone. There were 14 missed calls on it. I had counted them at the coffee stand and then turned the screen face down and ordered a chamomile tea I didn't drink. The gate agent smiled at me when I handed her the passes. "Just the 2 of you?" she asked. "Just the 2 of us," I said. She scanned both passes and handed them back and told me to have a good flight. I shifted Milo's weight against my shoulder and picked up the carry-on with my free hand. I picked Milo up without waking him, settled him against my shoulder and walked down the jetway. The fluorescent light above the 3rd panel was flickering. I watched it as I passed underneath. Behind me, somewhere in the terminal, a phone rang and rang. I did not turn around. The jetway smelled like recycled air and carpet cleaner and something faintly metallic, and the sound of the terminal fell away behind us as we rounded the last bend toward the door of the plane. A flight attendant at the door said something welcoming. I nodded. I found our row. I settled Milo into the window seat and buckled him in without waking him, and I sat down beside him, and I put my hands in my lap, and I looked at the seat back in front of me. I had bought the tickets 31 hours earlier, on a Sunday night, sitting at the kitchen table while Darren's family was still in the house. My name is Nadia Voss. I was 34 years old when I left. I am a licensed structural engineer, and I had been working for the same civil infrastructure firm in Cleveland for 9 years, the last 4 of them remote, which was how I had agreed to move from my apartment in Detroit to Darren's house in Westlake, Ohio, 2 years into our marriage. Darren Calloway was an operations manager for a regional logistics company. He was steady and capable and, in the early years, genuinely kind. He was also the youngest of 3 siblings and the only one who had moved more than 15 minutes from his mother's house on Briar Crest Lane. Renata Calloway was 61 years old and had the particular social skill of making every correction sound like concern. She did not raise her voice. She did not use harsh language. She tilted her head slightly when she disagreed with something and said, "That's interesting, I just wonder if," and then completed the sentence with whatever she actually believed. Her 2 older children, Marcus and Diane, had learned to complete her sentences for her. Darren had learned to agree before she finished. I noticed this in the first year. I told myself it was a family rhythm I hadn't yet learned to read. The gatherings happened every 6 to 8 weeks, Sunday dinners at Renata's house, holiday weekends, the occasional birthday. I showed up. I brought food I had cooked. I helped clear the table and wash dishes while Darren sat with his brother in the living room. I did not complain about this because I told myself it was temporary, that once Darren and I had more of our own life anchored in Westlake, the center of gravity would shift. It didn't shift. It solidified. What I carried in that marriage was not invisible to me. I knew exactly what it was. I just didn't have a language for it that Darren could hear without becoming defensive. I had negotiated my remote work arrangement so that we could live in his city, near his family, in a house that I had purchased, my name, my credit history, my down payment, drawn from savings I had built in the 7 years before we met. The mortgage payment came from my account each month. The utility accounts were in my name. The car we used for family trips was registered to me. In the kitchen, in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet beside the refrigerator, the drawer Darren used for takeout menus and expired coupons and had never once opened on my side, I kept the laminated county deed for 2214 Fenwick Drive in a manila folder with the rest of the property documents. I had absorbed our household's administrative load completely: insurance renewals, property tax filings, Milo's pediatric appointments, the preschool enrollment process that had taken 6 weeks and 4 rounds of paperwork. I had done all of it while maintaining a full-time project load that included 2 federally funded bridge assessments. None of this was secret. None of it was hidden. It simply wasn't discussed. What was discussed at family dinners and in the car rides home afterward was whether I was warm enough. Whether I laughed at the right moments. Whether I asked enough questions about Marcus's new truck or Diane's kitchen renovation. Darren would bring this up gently, genuinely believing he was helping me integrate. "They just want to feel like you're interested," he told me once. "It's not a big ask." I had replied that I was interested. That I simply expressed it differently. He had looked at me in a way that suggested differently was the problem. The year before the dinner that ended everything, I had covered $6,200 in household expenses during a month when Darren's paycheck was delayed due to a payroll processing error. I had not mentioned this at the time. I transferred the amount from my professional savings and said nothing, because we had a son in preschool and a mortgage due, and I did not want Milo to feel any disruption. Darren thanked me when his check finally came through and said we should go to dinner to celebrate. We went to an Italian place on Detroit Road. He ordered wine. I ordered sparkling water. Neither of us mentioned the $6,200. I understood by then that my competence had been reclassified. It was no longer something I offered. It was something they counted on quietly without acknowledgement, the way you count on the floor to hold you without thanking it. The dinner that Sunday started at 5:30 p.m. and went sideways by 7:14. Renata had made pot roast, which she always did when she wanted the evening to feel significant. Marcus and his wife Carla were there. Diane was there with her boyfriend. Darren sat at the end of the table nearest his mother, which was where he always sat. Milo was in the living room with the television on, old enough now to sit through 40 minutes of cartoons without needing me. I had brought a salad, dressed the way Renata preferred it, which I had figured out 18 months in and had been replicating ever since. I set it in the center of the table and sat down and poured myself a glass of water. Carla asked me about a project at work and I gave her a 2-sentence answer and asked her a question in return, which was the conversational rhythm I had learned to maintain. Marcus was talking about a new truck. Diane's boyfriend was asking Darren about something at the logistics company. Renata moved between the kitchen and the table with the ease of a person who has presided over the same room for 20 years. The table was the same one it had always been, long, dark wood, 6 chairs with cream cushions that Renata changed out every few years. I had sat at my usual spot, middle of the left side, with Darren at the near end and his mother at the far end. It was a table I had sat at perhaps 40 times in 4 years, and I had learned its rhythms, who reached first for the bread, who waited to be offered, how the conversation flowed in a current that always returned to Renata at the head. I had learned to participate in that current without redirecting it. I understood that was what was expected. What I had never understood was whether the effort was visible. Whether the years of showing up, of cooking the right salad, of asking about the truck and the renovation and the sister's new deck, whether any of that registered as work, or whether it was simply expected to be invisible, the way structural work is invisible when the building is standing. The evening had started without incident. The pot roast was good. Darren had poured wine for the table and I had taken a glass and held it. The conversation moved through Marcus's new project at his company and a trip Diane and her boyfriend were considering for the spring. Milo had eaten half his plate in the living room and then asked me for a cookie, and I had told him he could have one after dinner, and he had gone back to his cartoons without complaint. I had come back to the table and refilled my water glass and sat down. Renata had asked me something about the drive from Westlake and I had answered it. The comment started with Carla. She had asked, pleasantly, no apparent agenda, whether I was planning to take any time off during the holidays. I said I wasn't sure yet, that I had a project milestone in early January that I needed to track. Renata set down her fork. It seems like work always comes first for you, she said. Her voice was warm. Her head tilted slightly to the left. Something tightened at the base of my throat, not anger, not yet, a kind of careful stillness, the way a structure settles before a load test. That's not really accurate, I said. Milo is first. The work makes Milo possible. Of course, Renata said. I only mean Darren has mentioned feeling like you're not always present. At gatherings. With the family. I looked at Darren. He was looking at his plate. Darren, I said, is that something you've told your mother? I just mentioned, he said, still not looking up, that sometimes you seem distracted. At family dinners. In general. Marcus picked up his water glass. Diane looked at the centerpiece. Carla busied herself with the bread basket. I think, Renata said, that when you join a family there's an adjustment. And some people find it harder than others. No one is saying anything unkind. Renata, I said, I bought the house we live in. I pay the mortgage. I've attended every gathering for 4 years. I don't think presence is the issue. The table went quiet. Marcus looked at Renata. Renata looked at me. There was a specific quality to that look, not hostile, not even cold, just measuring, the look of someone taking stock of a situation they expect to resolve in their favor. Carla set her wine glass down carefully. Diane was very still. Darren looked up then. His expression was not angry. It was something closer to embarrassed, and the embarrassment was directed at me. Nadia, he said, this isn't the time. Then when is the time? He looked around the table briefly, then back at me. At home, he said. Not here. We don't have this conversation at home, Darren. You're making this uncomfortable for everyone. I'm making it uncomfortable, I said. Not the conversation your mother just started. Renata's voice came back in, still warm, still tilted. Nadia, we're just trying to have a family dinner. There's no need to be ungrateful for the people who care about you. There it was. Ungrateful. I put my fork down. Darren, he said, I think Nadia should apologize to your mother. That was Marcus. He said it the way you'd say pass the salt. Darren set his napkin beside his plate. He looked at me directly for the first time that evening. He's right, Darren said. Apologize, Nadia. Right now. Or this isn't going to work. The table was very still. I could hear the cartoon from the living room, a bright musical sting, then silence. What isn't going to work? I asked. Any of this, he said. If you can't respect my family, then maybe you should go. Take some time. Figure out what you actually want. I looked at him for a long moment. Something settled in my chest, not hurt, not fury, something colder and more permanent, like a beam finding its bearing load and locking in. Carla had set her fork down. Marcus was watching me the way someone watches a situation they've decided is not their problem. Renata had her hands folded in her lap, and her expression was the careful expression of a woman who has just gotten what she wanted and is waiting to see if she will have to ask for it again. I looked at Darren. He did not look away this time. All right, I said. No one said anything else. Marcus looked at the table. Darren looked at me. I did not look away. I stood up, walked into the living room, picked up Milo and carried him to the car. I did not cry on the drive home. I kept both hands on the wheel. I watched the road. I did not turn on the radio. I buckled Milo into his seat. I turned onto Briar Crest Lane heading west. I merged onto the interstate. I drove the speed limit. I took the Westlake exit. I stopped at the light on Columbia Road. I pulled into the driveway at 8:02 p.m. I turned off the engine. I sat in the car for 2 minutes. I carried Milo inside and put him to bed. I went back downstairs. I poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen sink and drank it. I stood there for a moment. The kitchen was quiet. The house was quiet. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. I called my sister Petra in Dearborn. I spoke for 4 minutes. I called my firm's international HR line and asked about remote work continuation under a non-US address. The answer was yes with 30 days notice. I opened a new browser tab. I pulled the manila folder from the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet beside the refrigerator, the one Darren used for takeout menus and expired coupons and had never once opened on my side. Darren came home at 10:40 p.m. By then I had done what I needed to do. I had not packed a suitcase. I had not left a note. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold when he came through the garage door. I think we need to talk about tonight, he said. We do, I said. Sit down. He sat across from me. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had spent 2 hours receiving sympathy from his family and had arrived home expecting the same. I reached into the manila folder. I took out the laminated county deed, the property record for 2214, Fenwick Drive, Westlake, Ohio, assessed value $634,500. My name on the ownership line. Only my name because when we had discussed adding Darren to the deed 2 years ago, he had said he didn't want the paperwork hassle and we had never returned to it. I set the deed flat on the table between us. Then I opened my banking app and turned the screen to face him. The wire transfer confirmation was on the screen, $18,340, sent that evening from my personal savings account to a joint account I had quietly restructured into my name only 6 months earlier, during a period when Darren had been too distracted by a work project to notice the paperwork I had placed in front of him. I laid the phone flat beside the deed. Darren looked at both. He looked at me. What is this? He asked. That's the deed to this house, I said. My name is on it. Yours is not. I know that, Nadia, we just never got around to. And that's a wire transfer I made tonight. Consolidating the savings. He was quiet. Where is Milo? He asked. Milo is safe, I said. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get tonight. He looked at the deed again. Something was moving behind his eyes, not understanding exactly, more like the early stage before understanding, the moment before a structure recognizes the load it's under. He looked at the ownership line. He looked at the wire transfer number. He set the phone down. You did this tonight, he said. It was not quite a question. I've been thinking about it for longer than tonight, I said. You're not seriously, he started. You told me to figure out what I want, I said. I did. I didn't mean. You said it in front of your mother and your brother and your sister and your brother's wife, I said. Apologize right now or go. Those were the options you gave me. I was frustrated, Nadia. Your mother called me ungrateful. You agreed. You sat there. He opened his mouth and closed it. I waited. The refrigerator hummed. The overhead light was steady and flat. He looked at the deed again and then at the phone screen, and I watched the moment when the two things connected for him, not as a surprise exactly, but as a confirmation of something he had perhaps known for a long time and had chosen not to examine. He pushed the phone back toward me slightly, not returning it, just moving it, the way you move something you don't know what to do with. He looked at his own hands on the table. He looked at the door behind me, as though checking whether the house was the same house it had been this morning, whether anything recognizable remained in the room. The house is mine, I said. The savings account is mine. I have a remote job that works from any address in the world. And I have a son who I am going to raise somewhere he will never be told that showing up isn't enough. Darren's voice shifted, not loud but stripped of the dinner table courtesy. You can't just take him out of the country. I already have a consultation scheduled, I said. You'll receive the documentation through proper channels. Everything will be done correctly. Nadia. You made a choice tonight, I said. In front of everyone. I'm making mine. I picked up the deed. I slid it back into the laminated sleeve. I closed my banking app. The house is mine, I said again, not as a threat, just as a fact, the way you state a load-bearing number. I think you should call your mother. I stood up. The kitchen light hummed above us, steady and indifferent. I walked down the hallway. I went to bed. I did not hear him follow. That was 14 months ago. Milo and I live in Lisbon now, in a third-floor apartment near the Alfama district, with tall windows and a landlord who fixes things the same week you report them. He turned 4 in March. He knows the word for bread in 3 languages and insists on choosing his own shoes every morning, which takes longer than it should, and I have stopped trying to rush it. Above my desk, pinned to the corkboard I brought from Westlake, is the county deed. Still in its laminated sleeve. The ownership line still reads the same way it always did. I look at it sometimes when I'm waiting for a file to render or a call to connect, not to remind myself of anything, just because it's there. It's a fact, the shape of a document. 3 weeks after we arrived, Darren left a voicemail. His voice was controlled, almost formal. He said he hoped I knew what I was doing. He said Milo deserved stability. He said his family was praying for us. I listened to it once. I did not call back. I saved the voicemail in a folder on my phone labeled documentation and moved on. The legal process took 8 months and was, as I had told him it would be, done correctly. Milo sees his father for 6 weeks in the summer. He came back from the first visit with a new stuffed dog and a sunburn and told me that Grandma Renata had made pot roast. Did you like it? I asked. It was okay, he said. Can we have pasta? We had pasta. I have learned that the people who call you ungrateful are usually counting something you were never supposed to notice. I noticed. I kept records. Some nights I sit at my desk after Milo's asleep, the city quiet outside the tall windows, and I run my hand along the laminated edge of that deed, the way the plastic coating makes it slightly warmer than paper should be, that specific weight, and I think, I built this. Every square foot of it. And I took it with me. If any of this felt familiar, the room going quiet, the moment someone handed you an ultimatum they didn't think you'd accept, share this with someone who needs to hear it. You'd be surprised how many people are waiting to be told the floor they built is still theirs.